Alex, they say the two happiest days of a woodworker's life are the day he finishes his shop and the day he decides to never ever touch drywall again. It's the redheaded stepchild of the trades. It's messy, it's heavy, and it's about as exciting as watching a tectonic plate move.
Spoken like a man who just spent 3 hours vacuuming white powder out of his eyebrows. But come on, Tiger, it's the skin of the house. You can't just leave the skeleton exposed, even if you are a wood guy.
True, but there is a distinct lack of poetry in a 4x8 sheet of gypsum. It's not like oak where you're following the soul of the tree. Drywall is just architectural makeup. And if you don't apply it right, your house looks like it's wearing cheap foundation that's starting to crack in the sun.
Which is why we're doing this. Because most people look at a blank stud wall and think, I'll just slap some boards up and mud it, how hard can it be? And then 3 weeks later, they're crying in a pile of sanding dust. So let's start at the very beginning. The hanging. I've seen people argue about horizontal versus vertical hanging for hours. Where do you stand?
If you're doing a residential room, you go horizontal. Every time. Unless you enjoy spending your weekend on your knees or a ladder trying to tape a 9-foot vertical seam that looks like a snake crawled under your wallpaper. When you hang it sideways, you get one long, easy-to-reach joint at waist height. It's just physics and laziness working in perfect harmony.
But wait, if I hang it horizontally, don't I end up with these awkward butt joints where the ends of the sheets meet? The ones without the tapered edges?
The dreaded butt joint. Yeah, they're the bane of my existence. See, the long edges of the board are beveled, thinned out to leave room for the tape and mud. But the ends, they're flat. If you just mash two flat ends together and tape over them, you're basically creating a speed bump on your wall.
So how do you hide the speed bump? Or do we just put a very large bookshelf in front of every joint?
That was my strategy in the 90s. But the real trick is back blocking or just being extremely aggressive with your feathering. I once tried to just glob enough mud on a butt joint to smooth it out, and I ended up with a wall that had a visible belly. I looked at it under a work light, and it looked like the wall was 3 months pregnant. You have to spread that mud out 12, 18 inches on either side to trick the eye.
Let's talk about the dimple. I watched you working on that utility room last week, and you were obsessed with the depth of the screws. You weren't just driving them in, you were like a surgeon with a cordless drill.
That's the most important part of the whole hang. If you break the paper, you've lost all the holding power. You might as well have used a piece of chewed bubble gum. But if the screw is sitting proud, even just a hair, your taping knife is going to hit it with a click-clack sound that will haunt your dreams. Every time you hear that click, you have to stop, get the screwdriver, and turn it a quarter turn. It ruins your rhythm. It's like trying to run a marathon with a pebble in your shoe.
I noticed you actually went back and checked every single one with your knife. Is that a Tiger original OCD trait, or is that standard practice?
It's the save your sanity practice. I learned that after a basement project where I thought I was a hero for finishing the hanging in 4 hours. Then I started mudding and realized I'd left about 50 screws high. I spent more time switching between my mud pan and my multi-bit driver than I did actually finishing the wall. It was a rhythmic dance of incompetence.
Okay, so the boards are up. We didn't break the paper, the joints are tight, and we've managed not to crush our toes. Now we get to the part everyone hates, taping. You're a paper tape purist, aren't you?
I want to love the mesh tape, I really do. It's sticky, it's easy, it feels like progress. But mesh is stretchy, and houses move, houses breathe. If you use mesh with regular all-purpose compound, that joint is going to crack the first time a heavy truck drives by your front door. Paper tape is a structural element. It's got a spine.
But paper tape is so finicky. You have to bed it in the mud, then squeeze out the excess, but not too much, or you starve the joint and the tape bubbles up like a bad sunburn. How does a beginner find that middle ground?
It's all about the squish. You want enough mud behind the tape so it's fully bonded, but you're not trying to build a layer yet. You're just gluing it down. I used to be so afraid of bubbles that I'd press way too hard, and the next day I could literally peel the tape off the wall because there was no mud left behind it. It was like a giant dusty sticker.
You mentioned all-purpose compound. I went to the big box store the other day and stood in front of the bucket aisle for 10 minutes feeling like an idiot. Green lid, blue lid, lightweight, setting type. It's a lot. If you're doing a standard room, what's the move?
Don't get me started on the bucket rainbow. Here's the shortcut. Green lid is your heavy hitter. It's got a lot of glue in it. That's what you use to bed your tape. But it's a nightmare to sand. It's like trying to sand a sidewalk. The blue lid, the lightweight stuff, that's for your top coats. It sands like a dream, like you're just brushing away clouds.
And the hot mud? The stuff that comes in bags?
That's for when you've made a mistake and you need it fixed before your spouse gets home. It sets chemically like concrete. It doesn't dry, it cures. You can put a second coat on in 20 minutes. But if you leave it in your pan too long, you'll end up with a 5-pound brick shaped like a mud pan and a very expensive paperweight. I once tried to wash out a bucket of hot mud in the utility sink. Let's just say the plumber and I are on a first-name basis now.
I can imagine. Hey, Tiger's back, get the jackhammer. Let's talk about the 3-coat rule. Most people try to do it in 1 or 2 and end up with a mess. Walk me through the patience required for a professional finish.
Coat 1 is the establishment. You're just getting the tape stuck and filling the factory bevel. It looks ugly. It looks like a scar. Don't panic. Coat 2 is the feathering. You use a wider knife, maybe an 8 or 10 inch, and you start pushing the edges out. You're trying to make the transition from the bump to the wall so gradual that a flashlight won't catch it.
And the 3rd coat, that's the skim, right?
Exactly. The skim coat is almost translucent. You're just filling in the tiny pinholes and the scratches from the previous pass. If you do your 2nd coat well, the 3rd coat is almost a victory lap. But most DIYers try to put too much mud on at once. They think they can sculpt the wall. You aren't Michelangelo, and that isn't marble. It's mud. Keep it thin. If you find yourself leaning into the sander for 4 hours, you put too much mud on.
Speaking of sanding, is there any way to do this without turning the entire house into a ghost town? I still find drywall dust in books I haven't opened since 2018.
Short answer? No. Long answer? Get a vacuum attachment for your sanding block. It won't catch everything, but it'll keep the atmospheric fog down to a manageable level. And for heaven's sake, turn off the HVAC, unless you want your furnace to look like it's been through a flower factory explosion.
What about corners? Inside corners are the stuff of nightmares. I've seen people try to do both sides at once and just end up gouging the side they just finished.
That's the classic dog chasing its tail move. You do one side, you let it dry, then you do the other side. If you try to do both, your knife is going to wreck the adjacent wall every single time. It's a test of character. Drywall is 10% skill and 90% waiting for things to dry so you don't ruin them.
It sounds like the ultimate test of slow is fast.
It really is. I remember helping a buddy do his garage. He was in such a rush, he didn't wait for the first coat to dry before hitting it with the second. The moisture from the new mud re-wetted the old mud, and the whole tape line just slumped off the wall like a melting ice cream cone. We spent the whole afternoon scraping wet goop off the floor.
That sounds like a very Tiger afternoon. So, after all the mudding, the sanding, the crying, how do you know you're actually ready for paint? Because paint doesn't hide mistakes, does it? It actually shines a spotlight on them.
Paint is a snitch. It will tell everyone exactly where you got lazy. The only way to be sure is the light test. You take a bright work light, not the overhead light, but a raking light, and you hold it parallel to the wall. Every little ridge, every pit, every holiday where you missed a spot will cast a shadow like the Grand Canyon. If it looks good under a raking light, it'll look like $1,000,000 under normal light.
And priming is non-negotiable, right? You can't just use that paint and primer and one stuff on fresh drywall?
Absolutely not. Fresh drywall and mud have 2 completely different levels of thirst. The mud will soak up the paint faster than the paper, and you'll end up with flashing, those dull spots where the joints are. You need a dedicated PVA primer to seal everything up and give it a uniform surface. It's like putting a base coat on a canvas.
Okay, let's wrap this up with the big takeaway. For the person sitting in their garage right now, staring at a stack of gray boards and feeling intimidated, what's the one thing they need to remember?
Just remember that drywall is a subtractive process as much as an additive one. You're going to put too much on and you're going to sand it off, and that's okay. That's okay. Your first room won't be perfect. You'll see a seam when the sun hits it at 4 p.m. But you know what? You built that wall, you gave that room its face, and the next one will be smoother.
And if it's really bad, you can always just hang a very large picture of a forest over the worst joint.
Or just tell people it's textured and call it a day. Artisanal plastering, I believe they call it in the fancy magazines.
Spoken like a true master. Thanks for the breakdown, Tiger. I feel slightly less terrified of the bucket aisle now.
Just stay away from the plumbing, Alex. Trust me on that one.